Hello, my name is Bret. This is my show on YouTube Live every week. And if you haven't been here before, this is actually live. We're listening to your comments, and that's the whole point of this, is to have a conversation with you and to take your questions about the topic du jour. And today we're going to be talking about GitHub Copilot. I'm very excited. But first off, a couple of things. Get your questions in early, and we may not be able to get through all of them in the hour or so that we have. And we sometimes will be lucky enough to go run long over the hour, but not always. And if you want to support this show, I am on Patreon. So you can sign up on Patreon. You don't even have to pay any money. You don't have to give me a coffee every month, but you totally could for extra benefits. Just go down there and click the follow button on patreon.com/Bret Fisher. The links and everything are down below. And you can sign up, and you'll basically get an email every week or so that is what I'm creating, what I'm doing in the world of open source, DevOps, and containers and stuff like that. So I appreciate all of you, now over 100 patrons that are buying me a coffee or two a month, and I'm really grateful to you. Thank you so much. You're the reason this show is still going. You give me hope. So I'm excited to have on the show today a friend of mine that has been here several times before, Docker Captain Nirmal Mehta. Hello.
Hello, Bret.
So go ahead.
I got to say to everyone, Bret runs off of that coffee, so you need to keep him caffeinated. So the shows are really well done. So become a Patreon, get some caffeine in Bret's veins, join the awesome community we have on Discord. It's awesome. You get to hang out with Bret and myself and other like-minded DevOps mastery folks and Docker mastery folks and Kubernetes mastery folks and universe mastery folks and whatever other things out there. So become a Patreon, get some more coffee into that gentleman's veins. Let's go.
Wow. Thanks, man. I did not expect that. Yeah, so we met years ago, Docker Captain program. Those of you might have seen him on the show before. We talked together the last 2 DockerCons, right?
Yeah. I miss seeing you in person, Bret.
Yeah.
We gotta, hopefully 2022 is when we can see each other again. How about that, huh?
We've already
DockerCon again.
And we've already started talking behind the scenes, like, either KubeCon or maybe an IRL DockerCon, or down there in Raleigh at, is it DevOps Days, or which one?
Yeah.
DevOps Days.
Yep. DevOps Days, RDU, April 2022 at the McKinnon Center. Check it out on devopsdays.org. And there's likely another DevOps Days conference near you if you're international. There's a ton of them around the world. They're all run by volunteers, and it's a nonprofit kind of organization. So check out your local DevOps community. I believe, Bret, have you spoken at a few in the past?
I have not even been to one.
Oh, that's on me, Bret. That's on me. We gotta make sure that happens.
Well, you're the closest one to me, 3 hours away, and yeah.
Oh man, that's really on me then. I gotta make that happen.
No, it's fine. It's just the challenge of all the conferences, right? I think it's the last few years I've tried to get there, but it's always around some other conference that I'm already booked at, and so yeah. But I'd love to go, especially since it's just like a drive away instead of a day's flight to the West Coast, and and that's like KubeCon this year. I'm getting back to just being an attendee at KubeCon, and like not trying to present, not trying to do a workshop, not trying to create work for myself, and just hang out with friends and enjoy the content and learn something. Like,
yeah,
it's been a while since that was the only thing I did at a conference. So yeah,
it's been a trying time this last year and a half, and hopefully we're turning a corner here, and we can get back to, I guess, business as usual, hanging out, learning new things.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, what's the topic for today's show, Bret? What are we exploring today?
Yeah, we're going to talk about and demo and maybe not try to break. I don't know if we can break it or not, but try to get some funny stuff out of GitHub Copilot. And I was lucky enough to get in the beta a little over a week and a half ago, maybe. Not beta, technical preview. No one does betas anymore. It's either preview or technical preview or early access, or I guess beta implies instability, and no one wants to suggest that anymore. I don't know if you noticed that. Like, no one does betas.
I have noticed that, but like, is technical preview a precursor to beta then?
That's a great question, because we used to be very used to understand alpha definitely going to break. Yes. Beta might break. Yeah. Release hopefully doesn't break. But now we have all these made up terms, like Docker had Edge for years, which they don't really have anymore. They have test builds or dailies. Yeah, so I don't know. Everyone's making up words, and that's because it's more than just software developers that are doing these things now. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I was
friendly.
I signed up for like a alternative, like a meat substitute, like plant-based meat thing, and they even called their fake bacon like a beta version.
Beta bacon?
Beta fakin.
the fakin beta. Beta fakin. Oh my, it's hard to say that. Um,
So yes, I agree with you. But I guess it was a tech preview of that
it
feature.
is. It is a tech preview. Oh, by the way, hello everyone in chat. Sorry, I haven't been paying attention to post all the hellos. Basically, everyone from all over the world. We got India in there. We got
Peru, Netherlands,
Europe. Always got Martin from the Netherlands showing up. Some of you reliable, friendly people that come every week, and I really appreciate you hanging out with us. So yeah, we're gonna get focused because like we only had this one topic, and Nirmal and I were talking about this while we were just hanging out the other week.
There we go.
And we and I don't know. We were in Discord complaining about Discord itself, and then I mentioned this Copilot thing, and I was using it with Terraform, with Docker, Kubernetes, like all these things that are DevOps related, not specifically programming. A lot of YAML and HCL stuff like that, and I was finding it mostly useful. And I put up a tweet, which I don't have, but it got a little traction of people saying, I didn't even think that would be a benefit of this, that it was more of a code thing. But the reality is this thing it'll recommend anything. It'll finish any line, whether it's a markdown file or no matter what language you're in. So anyway, for those of you that don't know, it's exactly that. Your AI pair programmer.
So can you take us or me through us, I guess, through how do you enable it? Like what like how do you interact with it, or how do you get it started with it?
So great question. I started by clicking the sign up. You get on the waiting list and you wait. I don't know how long I waited. I can't remember when I signed up, but I waited a while, at least a week or two. And then you get access to a repo of documentation, and then there is this Copilot thing that runs as a service. So this is technically like a service we're all using on the internet. I think they call it the OpenAI Codex, which sounds like something straight out of Matrix or Terminator. I don't know what it is, but and then the only editor that you can use it in is VS Code. So, well, I'm sure that eventually others could probably build into other IDEs, but the only one that works in today is VS Code. And you can use it with your local VS Code or Code Spaces, which I've talked about here before, but it's an extension that you add in that basically provides access from their AI service to write in your screen or make suggestions. And and then you just start writing. And so if I jump over and just show you, it's this tiny little button. I don't know if people can see it on the screen, but this tiny little button down
that is tiny,
in the bottom right. And and once you've added the extension just called Copilot, and of course, if you're not in the beta, technical preview, you won't, even though you can add the extension, it won't work. It'll say you don't have access yet. I tried to do that, and it says you don't have access. But once it's there, I think it starts deactivated, so it'll look red. Let me go back to an actual file. I'm just going to create a simple file to see if it'll.
So maybe while you're doing that, so fundamentally, Copilot is a code completion suggestion tool that's been trained using machine learning off of a corpus of all public or open source or whatever GitHub repositories are out there.
Yeah. So that's some great distinctions about. So there's all these great questions on their FAQ, which you can just use it. You can see it at copilot.github.com. But yeah, it's only on public source code. Their ML input is just open source code, billions of lines, as well as human language. So it can complete human sentences as well as code sentences, if that's a thing. Code statements. It is not a search engine. It is a code synthesizer. So only about 0.1, they say about 0.1% of the time, it will give you the exact input or output rather that it's got as an input. So it is not just recreating the exact functions that it copied from open source code. So a lot of people are like, there's comments about, we're not going to get into the licensing and legality thing of it, but people have said you're stealing other people's open source. Well, no, because it's not pasting in open source. It's synthesizing based on actual intelligent learning that it did. So, and it gives you options. You can use keyboard shortcuts to rotate through its suggestions because it's basically making these things up on the fly.
Got it.
Yeah. So if it has more than one suggestion, it'll let you rotate.
So I just want to make sure we're very clear, because obviously this is a very new thing that just was like less than a month old at this point.
Yep.
And we don't know what folks are used to that are on watching us right now, but it's not the equivalent of like searching on Stack Overflow for a code snippet,
right,
and then like copying and pasting that in based on what you were typing at the cursor. It's not that.
Right.
But it's kind of like that in the sense that it's generating what it thinks is the likely completion for what you're trying to type, what you have typed already.
Right.
Correct?
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing, is it's like, it's not uploading your code and analyzing it. It's a one-way thing coming down. It's not like uploading your private code. It's not learning on your project or other code. It only is in the file you're in. So the only file it can see and analyze for context, because there's an important point we'll get into about context. How does it know what to do? Well, It's all about context. And so it will only complete a line or a function. It won't write a whole file. It won't write a whole class. It won't generate from scratch the entire manifest of a Kubernetes. So Mazar in chat says, will this work on Kubernetes? It'll work on any file that I so far I've given it a bunch of different files: Terraform, Docker, Kubernetes, Markdown. There's lots of other channels out there that are showing coding languages. So Go, Node, so JavaScript, and all those work, right? So my theory is, if it's an open source file in some sort of code repo, it will help you in that file. So yes. It doesn't think of it, I don't think, as like, this is Terraform, this is Kubernetes. I don't actually, they don't have, the engine's not public, at least that I'm aware of. So I don't believe that it understands it's not like it's looking at file type for me. It's looking at what I'm doing in the file. And then if I have nothing in the file, it's not very helpful yet.
Yeah. So that word understand is very tricky when you talk about machine learning, because what does a machine learning model actually understand, right? So to your point, it still needs some input. So the context of the file that you're in, plus whatever you've typed in that file, is provided as input to this model, and then it returns some kind of generated material with some kind of probability associated with that, right?
Yep.
And then the option to paste that in, right? To accept that output from that model into your file directly.
Yeah, so it's always suggesting, and so if you don't hit tab, you can just ignore it. And that's the tricky part for me over the last week, is I have all these other extensions that provide templating and stuff. So it sometimes is not easy to tell, wait, was that Copilot, or was that like my extension functionality for creating a deployment? Because I can do that with Kubernetes files, and I can just generate a template if I hit the right keyboard shortcuts. But let's do a couple, and you can ask questions while we go, because I think
So just to like close the loop on that.
Yeah.
What's another, like, IntelliSense, right? Is like something else that maybe some of the folks would be used to using in an IDE. And, IntelliSense is pretty awesome, right? Or like
Yeah.
that code completion kind of tooling that you see in IDEs like JetBrains or VS Code or Visual Studio or whatnot. So this is in that. This seems like an evolution of that kind of tooling, correct? Or
Yeah.
that kind of feature or functionality of an IDE. So
yeah, and you could. Oh, sorry.
All right. Someone said stop jabbering, start showing. Go ahead, Bret.
I would say that in some ways it's better than IntelliSense. In some ways it's worse. And because IntelliSense won't give me an entire function. And IntelliSense only works on files that it knows how to use, and which are a small subset, I think, of what is in open source. But
Got it.
I could be wrong.
Go for it.
All right. So first you got to enable it. So that little red means it's not enabled. I'm going to enable it globally, but you can enable it for specific file types or whatever. And I'm in a Docker file. So notice that the way this works is it looks like it's trying to, it's gray. So if you see gray text show up in front of my cursor, that is Copilot. If there's anything else you see, like pop-ups or squigglies, none of that's Copilot. That's all other things like spell checkers or things that are actually in language-specific intelligent reminders, because that's all a part of VS Code, right? There's all this other stuff built in, syntax things that, and Copilot is not those. So it's only going to show gray text in front of my cursor. So if I just start typing, so notice what I maybe could do here is say, start from Ubuntu. Oops. I'm gonna.
It was already starting to. Oh, there we go.
So look at that. So what's interesting is I notice a lot of times when there's version-based things, it's old versions. It's never the latest version. So
Interesting.
So it's providing that line, right?
Probably because older versions are statistically more.
Right. There's more of them, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So it doesn't have a concept of like, oh, that's an old version. I might want to pick the newest version. Like it's not. It's not that smart yet.
It doesn't understand that.
Yeah, I keep saying that word. I don't know what that really means. Yeah, there isn't some sort of logic gate in there that says if it's a number and it seems to be many numbers, pick the newest number. Yeah.
Right. So I want to, and this might not be true. It might not be true now, and it might not be true in the future. But it seems like Copilot does not have a semantic understanding of like that language's structure, like the semantics of like a Docker file or like any kind of language.
You would think so, but I'm going to show some examples that would question that.
Okay, that's it. Yeah, there you go. This is perfect.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because
so
this is where the fuzzy line is, right?
Yeah,
respects all this. Go ahead.
I think that one of the big questions I wanted to answer over the last week was, will this? Well, two things. One, does this replace people? And in no way, no. Like, and it doesn't make a junior person smarter. Not really. Because the thing you have to do with every one of these examples is you have to know whether what it's suggesting will work, or just try it and see if it'll work. Because like, if I don't know what Ubuntu version is, like the latest one, it's not telling me that. Now I can hit Option bracket back and forth, and it's not giving me any other suggestions. So it's only suggesting that thing. So I can type 2004 because I know better. And then I can say, okay, so now I'm going to copy. Now here's the thing. It only starts suggesting on either you adding a comment to give it direction. So that's the context it needs to know what you want next. Or you start a line and it specifically says function name and function options in their documentation. But again, we're not using it for programming here. So I might just say copy in source code and see. Okay, so yeah. So because earlier I was typing in copy space and waiting for it to suggest what I want to put in. But again, this is wrong because I don't have a code directory. Or like, I guess I could. I guess it could be an opinionated way to say, yeah, I'm going to put the code in a code directory. Maybe it's a problem of my
basically when
you
wrote copy,
right,
and you were waiting, it was like too broad.
Yeah,
right? There we go.
Yeah. So if I give it better direction, it knows to have better output.
Which in a way it forces you to make good comments.
Honestly, part of me thinks that this might actually yield us better documentation in code in line. Yeah, because if you're lazy and you just don't want to have to copy the line or type the line in, yeah, how how good a documentation do I have to create so that the AI can then generate my code for me? So really, I'm just a great describer of what I want.
I'm going to send this into the void, but I wonder if this was hooked into like a Jira ticket, if it could just read the user story and then paste in the code.
Yeah. So see, it's every time if I said build script, it runs build.sh. If I say run npm build, it knows npm install. So
interesting. But this is for a Docker file, which isn't necessarily like the target functionality. Like let me say this properly.
Yeah.
I think Copilot was initially created mostly just for actual code, right? Versus you're using it for like infrastructure, DevOps kind of stuff, which it can do, it seems, but it might not be like the target kind of functionality.
Exactly. Yeah, we may not be the exact, but the thing is, they say that it processes natural language as well as code files. And to me, like, what's the difference between? To me, I don't know. I wonder if to a machine, the difference between a Docker file and a JavaScript file is that JavaScript has functions and this doesn't. But other than that, it's still suggesting logic. I don't know. But I found it very helpful, but it's also incredibly, there are bad examples. So I'd say 50% of the lines I have to edit that it gives me.
Interesting.
And it's only, and in my world, it's only giving me one line at a time. Like if I'm doing YAML, it's one line at a time. So if we do
if you're doing code though, it can, like I've seen demos of it where it's giving you full like function blocks in code. Correct?
Yes. Yeah. So in code, it will give you, you'd write the function name and then the function options, and it will start, and then it will give you an entire function to do that. And they show that on their website, actually. We just go back to their little demo here, which by the way, I realize that these are interactive.
That's mind-blowingly cool.
That's super cool graphics on a website. But yeah, so if you can see them and you can say replay, it will, you write a function name with some, and then that's what it gives you.
So it does understand the semantics of like the variables that you were using to describe certain things. So it's kind of like in between templating, IntelliSense, and like backed with like the training from a bunch of different repos.
Right. Yeah. So let me catch up with some of the comments there.
Yeah.
Did the robot also read online documentation to learn? Yeah, I mean, they said that they gave it online open source, and I'm pretty sure that when they gave it open source, I'm just going to guess they didn't take out every non-code file. Like they probably didn't strip READMEs and Terraform and Docker files out of it, right? So it clearly learned on that, and then. Yeah, so I bet you, and I think Paul's onto something like maybe if in that line I would have said in the Docker file, start from a Ubuntu 2004 base image, but then you could argue that the value is like continually declining as I'm basically writing the exact thing in longer format in a comment. I probably should just write the line, right? So far, for me, it's questionable value in a Docker file, but that's honestly because I live in Docker files all day and I know everything about them. So like, it's not showing me anything I don't already know, right? Where it comes into valuable, and to me, it became more valuable when I was doing Terraform this last week, and I was using specific Terraform providers that I didn't have all of the different values and options memorized, and it did. In at least 50% of the cases, it did. So I was looking at documentation less because it was suggesting something that I was like, oh yeah, that's the thing I want, yeah. And we can do that demo next if anybody wants that one, or we can look at a deployment because that one's also interesting. But
let's do deployment, and then let's do the Terraform. And remember, this is supposed to be a pair programming kind of experience, right? In the sense of.
Right, it's my virtual.
I mean, even if
my
Bret and I, like, pretend Bret, you and I were pair programming, like both of us could be wrong, right, about something. So, like, I guess that's similar, right?
Yeah, and one of the demos we probably won't get to today, but we neither one of us have tried live share, but we can do it if we want. If you don't have a hard stop, right? So
No.
So one of the questions was, does he take advantage of my Copilot if we're in a live share together, editing the same file together?
Right.
My assumption is not, but because it's not really written until I hit tab. So
got it.
Create a Kubernetes deployment of Nginx.
Let's do deployment. Let's do Terraform. We can try to do a live share. How about that? After that.
Okay, so here's an interesting thing. Like the very first line is wrong. So, right. So what I need to do is what I've found with Kubernetes YAML is because there's no other context in the file, I have to kind of start seeding it a little bit at the beginning. So I have to say, like, well, let me give that there.
So a comment won't cut it.
Right. A comment on, because I mean, I'm not even sure if it's reading the file name or file type, because I'm not actually sure that this just knows YAML. Mm-hmm. It doesn't know that it's Kubernetes YAML yet. So it could be part of the problem of so API version.
And most people aren't putting like a comment at the top of their Kubernetes YAML saying this is a Kubernetes YAML.
Right. They aren't, which we totally
if they
should
had
be.
done. Yeah, but if they had, this might have picked that up already.
Right. Now notice it is providing me a Kubernetes extension here. It's the wrong one for deployment, but apps v1, and then okay, so there we go. Now it's got me a correct line. That is the correct line for deployment. And then okay, that one is correct. So all I'm doing is hitting tab and then enter. And now okay, I'll call it Nginx deployment. That's the correct format. Now, oh wait, shit. Okay, so notice this pop-up, which I've actually never seen it do this before.
What is Open Copilot?
So the next and the previous are the keyboard shortcuts I've been using for showing me the examples. Except is the tab that I've been hitting. Open Copilot gives you this other window that will give you up to 10 solutions for that thing.
Wow.
So it's essentially like, what if I accepted every line it gave me? So it goes through the spec.
Do you want to move our bubbles? I think it's being blocked.
Sorry. Yeah. I can just move that over here. So this is the Copilot suggestion. So it's giving me 10 of 10 suggestions.
Whoa.
It doesn't let me in there fill out the whole thing at once. So I have to go line by line, but this is essentially what it would be giving me. What I also noticed again was versions were really out of date. I think the first version it gave me when I first tried this, it was like 1.9. So it's a really old version of Nginx. But then it's also giving me a service, which is not what I asked for, but also you would normally need, right?
Uh-huh.
So what it's actually giving me here is these dashes are the breaker between the solutions. So that's a complete solution. It's actually suggesting a whole nother thing. Normally you get to this through a keyboard shortcut, but if you hover, which I've never seen the hover option before, then it gives you this. So here's another one, a different version of Nginx. Same container port.
Even older.
Yeah. We're going back in time. So I don't know if they're in order of preference of likelihood. Like the first one is the
probability.
One yeah, probability.
Yeah. I mean, machine learning models typically work on.
It's giving me comments too.
How close they are to whatever like survival or fitness goal that they gave it, right?
And you're already exceeding my understanding of these things. So.
Yeah, so like in order to train it, they use some of the data and then they probably compared it to something, right? And then the likelihood that it's close to whatever that they were training it off of is probably the order that this is in.
Yeah.
But I mean, tried and true, garbage in, garbage out, right? So if most of the Kubernetes deployment YAML on GitHub open source repos isn't written right,
Yeah.
or has errors in it, then it will likely give you that error back.
Oh, look at that. Copy out. It automatically pre-filled in my comment or my desire there. Copy out the build code to dist. So if I hit the keyboard shortcut for that window again, because now I'm interested in.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
So now it's
there's another option there.
Ooh, yeah. From build. So it's doing multi-stage there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I don't know. I feel like we're at the child development stages of this AI,
Absolutely.
Right?
But here's the thing, like this is just, for lack of a better term, brute machine learning model. If this was used as a base and then there was some IntelliSense or semantic, more classic kind of rules engine, intelligence based, then it becomes even more powerful, right? If it was like fed through there and then fed through some constraints, then it could get really much more useful.
Actually, sorry, no, you're right. That's a good question, Peloton. So on these, if it synthesizes it, it does take a minute. Accept solution, so it copies in the one that I wanted. So that I have not done before. That's
so that
pretty
must
cool.
Be new. Yes.
Well, no, I just think I didn't spend a lot of time in the Copilot window understanding that, because I would just complete per line, and so I basically be enter, wait, tab, enter. I would accept each one as it went. That is a much easier way to complete the whole thing. Of course, this could be total gibberish. Again, only about 50% of the time is it giving me what I really wanted. And that's on a per line estimate. In their official documentation, they say that 45% of the time it's correct the first time.
That's a head scratcher.
Yeah. I feel like that's a line. What is that? There's a show that 50% of the time I'm correct all the time or something like that. Yeah. So the project this week that I took some screenshots from, I just want to show some screenshots real quick, and then we can dive into some questions if people have them. I've been trying to keep up, but over here, this was real world stuff I was doing this week. Did you have something? Oh, you're on screen.
Yeah. So who in the our audience today thinks Bret is actually typing all these lines, or is it all just Copilot? Anyways, keep going.
If you've seen me type, you know that it's definitely not that fast. So this is a Terraform file outputs. So this is me. It's almost like boilerplate stuff that's kind of the inputs and outputs of Terraform, like a lot of other things. You're making a values file, you're making an outputs file, and it's all very repetitive. But again, this is not able yet to even look at my project or other files, much less the rest of my own code, whether it's open source or other projects. I can imagine like in years from now, because they talked about that this is just the beginning and they're doing other things. And I can see where you let it opt in to maybe some sort of area, so some sort of secure area that they will analyze your code and layer that opinion on top of their own generic opinion so that it can look at my other files, my other repos, and understand the way that maybe I do things, my two spaces or 4 spaces and my tabs, I can see how eventually I have my own actual personal one where this is very generic. It's only to the file I'm in. So I'm going to play this little video. But what I'm doing is I'm just adding simple output variables. And so I'm typing output, and then I'm just giving it a name because I have to start with this context of what am I wanting to name. And so I type in instance, I think this one's architecture. And then I give it the curly brackets. And then I hit enter, and then it says correctly the value from another file that it can't see. And then it's giving me the correct description for the thing that I want. And so I basically was able to go through this output file very quickly without having.
But you knew that was right.
Things. Right, because I had just created the other file stuff and I knew the names. Now, what I believe it's doing here is it's looking at the value names that I'm creating so far and determining based on that. But it was right way more than 50% of the time, just because I was creating a consistent value name. But these are all variables that I'm just pulling in, and I have a very consistent way of naming them, and so it was able to figure that out and do that. So that's a great example, I thought, of I think the tweet I was talking about was about this thing, and I was saying 80% of this stuff that I'm typing in, I'm not typing. And that was on day one. That was the first day I was using it last week. And I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't understand it. I didn't know all the keyboard shortcuts. Like, I just turned it on, and this is what it was doing.
I think if there's any folks out there that are working on new open source tooling or any kind of command line tool or configuration file and working on the user experience of that or developer experience, I think it'll be very interesting to use Copilot to see because of how it's probably trained, there's a leaning toward what the majority of the content and the files that it used as input did. Mm-hmm. Whether those are right or wrong can be determined by running through Copilot and seeing what the typical errors occur. And that could be very valuable to adapting your developer experience for whatever tool that you're creating. Because if you see that, like, you know, some majority of the repos out there are wrongly, you know, are incorrectly using your YAML configuration file or your interface, that probably highlights like a bad developer experience or something that goes against intuitive usage of your tool. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm getting a little bit too deep there, but this opens up a lot of things. In terms of
I've started to wonder, like, yeah. And if this is an API that I'm assuming they're going to keep open so that it's not just VS Code limited. That's an assumption, by the way. I don't actually know. Like, I can see people writing front ends for your CLI. Like, imagine typing sudo space Docker, and then it just starts to try to autocomplete the line. Like, where does it end if the engine is looking at other behavior? I don't know how it would complete command lines because the thing about command
files, right? Like or like those .sh files that are just like
exactly
all over the place.
Those files are commands, right? So if it can read those, then you would assume that it could help me at the command line, which gets me to my next example of I hate regex only because I don't understand it. Obviously, it's very powerful and we all need it, but so in this example, I'm using a YAML file in a workflow for GitHub Actions, which I've talked nonstop about lately. And what I'm trying to derive is the current branch I'm on inside of my action, which it doesn't give you an output value that always tells you what current branch you're on, which is weird. I find it weird. So what you have to do is you have to take something called, I'm actually going to use my screen painter. So this is the part I'm talking about right here. This is the line that I'm on. And the GitHub.ref is the value that they provide me inside of this machine runner that I want to get out, and then I want to set it to get the part of that value that I want. I was going to have to go to a sed site and then type in what and practice my sed again to get my regex right. And it was a relatively simple one, but I'm horrible at it. So without any real other context other than maybe me describing it a little better. Thank you. It correctly got that line on the first try, which I thought was a fairly advanced line. And the sed, which I don't normally use seds with bangs. I'm sorry, not bangs, but
hash.
Hash. I normally use a /. So I had to look up that even that was correct syntax, but it was, and it worked. And so I thought that was really interesting because it taught me something. And I see that in people commenting about it, even on their website, they've got a bunch of people saying things like, this is what people say about Copilot. And one of them was, it's teaching me stuff about my language I didn't know, which I think is fascinating as a way to learn. IntelliSense can often do that as well, but IntelliSense wouldn't ever give me this line, right?
Right. So I think a combination of IntelliSense with something like this is very powerful. And I think that's probably where it's going.
Yeah.
Because
It needs
I
kind of
mean,
both.
we've all I'm gonna make a generic statement. We've all been there when we are using those IntelliSense tools. Maybe you imported a new library, but instead of like deeply diving into the documentation, you just open up IntelliSense and then like look through the interface functions that you have available, and like kind of just like noodle through it in a kind of recursive way of like what it needs to get the thing that you want done, right?
Yeah.
So that's one way to like learn a library or a programming language, is to just like brute force, like figure out what's going on through that documentation, through IntelliSense kind of
Yeah.
tooling, right?
Yeah. I can see an amalgamation of this stuff where it's first suggesting the logic and then analyzing the logic to see if that's even going to work, right? Because I don't think I'm just going to guess. I don't know if the machine learning model actually understands sed syntax and regex and GitHub values. I'm just guessing that this was a line that someone else has in one of their workflows, and they knew it. Now, an example of how this fails is not that one yet. That one's a whole conversation. But later in that file, I'm asking for an if statement. So this is an if on if this value in GitHub Actions is this, then let this thing happen, right? That value over here isn't even a real thing. Like that's not something that GitHub provides. So it's suggesting, and that this is the part of the problem is if you don't know your language or you don't know your file or whatever, sure, it may be correct, but it also may be complete garbage and it won't work. So, and it's not going to know how to tell you the difference. So this one, and I saw this and I went down a rabbit hole. This actually wasted me time because I went down a rabbit hole of going, wait, is GitHub.pr a thing? Let me go look at the documentation. And I couldn't find it anywhere in the API. Then I went back and then I did some Google searches and barely found any results. So I don't know where it got that from. There's like basically like 6 hits on the internet that have that exact value. So I don't know what that is or how I got that. It is describing it correctly because that's exactly what I want. I want the PR head ref, but that's not a thing I can get. So
interesting.
It's sometimes it's super confusing and will waste you as much time as you want to save on something else.
So is it sending? I'm assuming as part of the tech preview that it's sending data back to Copilot whether you accepted its solution or not.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't seen documentation that says that exactly, but they do have this great little image that suggests that. That's a great question.
I mean, that's the only way they would know whether it's good or not, right?
Yeah, improve suggestions. Yes. So my guess is what that is, because I don't know of any part in the interface and I read their getting started guide. It didn't say like thumbs up things you like. Like there wasn't anything like that in there. So my assumption is the improved suggestions, which is the arrow that's coming back. So it is getting from you the editor context. So I guess technically the thing you are sending it is either the README or the beginning of your function with the function name.
Right.
So it is getting that, and then it's providing the suggestion. And then I'm assuming this is like you're saying, like I chose that suggestion, so I'm giving it a thumbs up, essentially.
Yeah. And if you keep typing and don't accept it, it probably sends that as well, saying, that wasn't right.
Yeah, like maybe over time, for 1,000 times, if I chose Ubuntu 2004, maybe eventually would learn that that's the one. I don't know. But I also don't think these things are unique. Like I don't think I nowhere have I read as it suggested that there is some sort of profile on me to get mine. There is no Bret learning. It doesn't have a Bret profile to know how I like it.
Right.
So I'm assuming I'm going to keep getting the same old problems until a ton of people all together. And I'm excited. Like imagine 1 million people doing this thing. Like how much input and learning it's going to be doing. And changing on it. Like what's kind of weird is that you could start relying on it and then it keeps changing on you because it's learning so much. You would hope that it's learning to be better, but you may not want that. I don't know.
So so that's the second keyword, relying, like reliability. Yeah, this isn't designed to completely be relied on, right?
Yeah.
In that sense. Right?
Yeah, they mentioned that in here, that it does not replace you. It's still totally up to you. Like it is,
Right.
it is empowering you with either gibberish or knowledge you didn't have. Yeah. It's at least on Stack Overflow, because Peloton is mentioning like this is basically Stack Overflow. Like at least in Stack Overflow, you can kind of derive from the thumbs up whether that's
And
still
comments.
working. Yeah, and if it's no longer working, people will start to comment on that, and we get none of that here, right? So it's a little blind. Yeah. One last really odd result that kind of freaked me out. So this gets me into the conversation around private data and things that it should never suggest, like API keys, or, like one of the things you can do is...
Can you make a file with like an AWS key file?
So here we go. If I go into variables and I say,
yeah, there we go. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
So that worked. That worked. That's how it's supposed to do it, right? Not pre-fill it. But I bet.
Can you try the other solutions? Just go back and try.
So hold on.
Oh. This is fascinating.
Oh, it's not. See, it was totally filling it in like 3 days ago. It wasn't my key. It wasn't my key. It was gibberish.
So that was I think you probably were in a group of people figuring that out as well. I guarantee you people are trying to figure that out right now too. Right?
Yeah,
like
and if we do the
like your database password, or your like, what's that PHP file, like a init file, right?
Yeah, the PHP ini. Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so yeah, it's pretty smart here, right?
I guarantee you though, that's a bespoke rule they put into the engine.
Yeah. See, it was weird. It's not giving me type here. Okay. So I think what I was doing was maybe something a little less common than that. So value. Let's see, GitHub. And of course, this thing is constantly learning, and yeah. So this is already better. This is already better. Yeah. So one of the things that they were saying, and one of the replies to people that were asking about this, was that it's so rare that it would ever do that out of like open source, because of the way that they've trained it, that what it's showing you is sample data. But you can't tell the difference. How would I know, right? So I can see someone creating something very quickly that would just let it randomly generate that stuff, hoping it's wanting to see if it's random, and then just trying them, like basically a brute force attack. So this gets me to...
and it's not every language, right? So this is like stuff that maybe is like very common, but like if you're using some kind of library that's not as common, and people just put their yeah.
It has to, I think, and you're right. Like, the nice thing is that as long as you're when you're in open source, you tend to be using things that a lot of other people are using. So hopefully, this is a very, they actually have an FAQ at the bottom. I highly recommend everyone look at that, because it's super informative. And they talk about like, it happens very rarely, but it does happen, and it can happen so that's why it's risky, I think, for us to think, well, what if I do it on the rest of my code, or the code that has access to my organization, or whatever? Because then it has to understand security policy and like the context of, do you have access to that data for it to learn on? Like that's just kind of weird. One more one. This is the last one I got, which is pretty hilarious. So I'm writing a Markdown file, and it's actually sometimes helpful in the Markdown file. I put in basically, this is a list of me putting in Markdown links to other projects for an open source project I created this week on something I did last week using Terraform. So I create a GitHub action runner from Terraform. I have an open source repo. We'll probably talk about it some other week.
Okay.
And I'm pointing to other popular repos that provide ways for you to run GitHub runners. I put in the first one, and then it provides me a suggestion. So I hit tab and then enter, and then it provides another suggestion, and I hit tab and then enter, and it keeps going. And I'm like, I don't know if you can notice, but it's going down like a weird rabbit hole of the names on this thing. It like just keeps adding values.
Are those legit links though? No, right?
This person's name, I don't know if they, let me see if they actually exist. I don't think they actually existed. I know that the repo doesn't exist. Mike
Farah.
So this person exists. So it's making suggestions. And this is a question. Is that sensitive information? Should it not be suggesting this real world person's?
But at the same time, how many places in YAML files or other places are you actually referencing people's repos, right?
Okay,
that's legit.
Yeah.
Right?
But the weird thing is they don't have a single public repo with the word GitHub in it. So as a real person, real account, none of these repos are real. But it's
now if you commit that and then open source that repo and then the model gets trained, does this just become self-reinforcing over time?
Is this like the Twitter bots of 2017 or whatever with Microsoft and
yeah, we're not going to go down that path.
Well, I mean, but this is the internet. That's what people will do, right? Let me generate a bunch of data to see do I have enough power to change the engine on my own, I guess is a question.
Correct.
Or is it?
That's wild. That is wild.
Yeah. So I just kept hitting the answer, accepting. And then at some point I was like, wait a minute, are these repos real? Because I thought they were real. I was like, maybe it's suggesting me all the other things that are like this thing. Maybe it's that smart. And it wasn't. It wasn't. It was complete garbage.
It looks like AWS autoscaling is very popular, though.
It's using all the words that I said in the document and then just giving me back what I think I want to hear. It's lying to me, and that's the weird part of this whole thing. Is it though? Is it a lie? It's fabricating URLs that don't exist. That's exactly what it's fabricating URLs. That's kind of creepy.
That is very wild. But at the same time, so much, if you're doing this on Golang, you're going to have GitHub repos, right? In your dependency graph, right? And that's real, right?
Yeah, the weird thing is it responds to comments. So if you're doing a markdown file, what is a comment in a markdown file to it? Is the whole thing a comment? Crazy.
Nothing.
Yeah. So, links to other Copilot pages. So remember, everybody, if you see any gray text, that is it suggesting inline in real time there. There we go. It's actually suggesting the Copilot master README.
There we go.
Is that a real link? Let me check. Oh, command click. No, that is not a real file. It is a 404. So, sorry, people can't
but
see us.
That might actually be an internal file.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. But maybe. Because they do give you, when you get access, they do give you access to something called Copilot. It's /GitHub/Copilot-preview. But yeah, does Copilot itself?
This might be the internal.
So if I go to github.com/Copilot. Oh, that's a person. It's Aaron Wagner.
That poor person.
Yeah. And they do not have a Copilot named repo. So now they're going to, and this is where it just starts to go off the rails, right? But so if you go around YouTube right now, there's people are doing all this stuff all the time, but I think all the ones I've seen so far, they're largely doing it in code. They're interested about the coding of it, but it's active in every file type that you put in and accept. So, what other interesting language might we look at?
So that's a question. Let's put that question out to the audience. Like, what are some things that y'all would use this for, or would want to try it on?
Someone gave me the idea of try to reference a private file. Actually, what's weird is that it doesn't understand Markdown syntax here, it seems like, because you don't put square brackets for the URL. So maybe this is the comment. Bret's node. Oops. Bracket.
What's that file?
No, I need to enable
word wrap.
Oh, okay, so that's a weird bug. It looks like the suggestion doesn't word wrap, even though I've got word wrap turned on.
Oh, send in a note.
So it's to an account that is not me. How about, what if I say Bret Fisher?
It is Bret's Docker node example, though, right? No.
It may be there. I have to activate it again. Bret Fisher Docker node. So no, that's not a real repo. So it's basically broken on links and Markdown stuff, because that you would think that it would only suggest. But again, that would be a suggestion engine, and it's not. It says it's not a snippet suggestion engine or whatever. It's a synthesizer.
So you're actually proving that it is synthesizing things, and not just like
not giving me things that exist. It's giving me things that don't exist.
Correct. So it is synthesizing.
So exactly. I guess yes, it works. We've just used it the wrong way. Yeah. Anyway,
what a fascinating. I hope for me with Copilot, I hope it's not a red herring, right? I hope it's not like no matter how much it gets trained, like it will never speed up anything, right? It will only be 2x whatever the time is for you to just do it anyway, right?
Right.
And the other thing is, just for context, when this was announced and people started using it, there's a lot of questions around copyright, legality, what you were talking about, Bret, private information or
stealing from others. Yeah.
Yeah. Or stealing like code implementation. And there's a very potentially legally gray area for a lot of this. And then there's also like originality, right? Like if you're using it to create things, do you actually own, like who owns what's created, right? And all that kind of stuff. And we're not going to get into that. I guess there's a thing on protecting originality. But I think those are all really big open questions, but it's interesting to me to like it. I'm excited to see where those discussions go. The other part of this is I think this highlights some of the potential issues with like the no code, low code movement as well, right? Where I think fundamentally it's still true that the higher you go in abstraction, the more limited the scope of what problems you can actually solve with that without breaking that, going deeper. And that's still the same case for Copilot, right? Like as much as it's helping you, it can just be sending you in the completely wrong direction. And at the same time, you'll have to like spend the time to go deeper on anything that it suggests anyway. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you mentioned the low code thing too, because I think have you ever seen any of those videos where it's like watch I can't remember who did it. I don't know if it was GitHub or Microsoft or somebody. It was like follow an expert programmer for a day And this was a year or two ago at least that I watched this YouTube video. It was fantastic because for those that are trying to get into development, not specifically into DevOps, but just development in general, it was someone recording. Oh, I know. It was actually a friend of mine on Udemy that basically recorded their screen for a whole day, and then they were working on a client project, and they showed, as someone who's been in the biz for 10 years, how much they spent searching and Stack Overflowing, and like that's just that it doesn't ever stop. Like you don't get to a point in most careers nowadays where we're not all just writing the same COBOL language for 10 years. Like that's just and the versions don't ever. There was 30 or 40 years ago, there was a time where the only place you had to look up was in a book, and you and I. Maybe just me. I was old enough that that was a very short amount of time where that was what I was doing. I had to go to Barnes and Noble to learn and go buy a book. And we're beyond that now. So no one developer can be expected to know everything about their language. And he sort of proved that by showing how much of his time in a day was not actually writing, but actually searching for what he needed to write. And what's interesting to me is that in this, there's two aspects of it that I can see specifically for developers that it will be a big advantage is that it will at least lower that percentage of how much you have to go look for something when you're not sure the right part of that function that you need to add, or how many values can you put into that the options of that function or whatever. Like there's just a certain amount of that you can not have to spend Googling, and it's right there in your code. You don't have to leave your editor. The other thing that I've seen it do that I haven't yet gotten into myself, but I've watched other YouTube videos, is that it's pretty good at writing tests, like very simple, small function tests. So one of these things is you could argue that it doesn't really matter if your code isn't the way that someone else might write it, if their tests pass and the function correctly executes.
Correct.
So if you can use it to help you write the function, and then you can help it write the test for that function, and you're always writing tests, is there harm to this? Is there, what if it's not using the latest spec? Because one of the problems I ran into is with my Terraform, it was suggesting me things that were legacy, that were deprecated. And I didn't know that because one of the problems was all the examples that it was learning from were all using the old pre-Terraform 1.0 way of doing things. And I stumbled onto an example that was using the new way that was actually easier, but it wasn't suggesting that. And I ran through the options again. It never suggested the new way because I guess that's so new that people aren't doing it yet. But I was essentially using like the new version of a method, and it was not helping me with that. It kept wanting to do the old way. So that's a problem too. Is it's going to likely give you old stuff.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's some tweaking, like the sources, like maybe only like the top 1,000 GitHub repos, and then only code that's like less than 4 years old or something like that, right? Like maybe there's some way to like tweak the model and kind of get rid of the long tail of suggestions.
That's an interesting suggestion. So like code that is dated this year gets more precedence than yeah.
And then the other thing that would be interesting is if you just write tests and then let it write code to pass those tests.
Yeah.
I think will be an interesting.
Oh, so like
reverse scenario.
You write the test and then it writes the code, and it's smart enough to look at the test, and that would all have to be in the same file, at least currently, because it would run it against.
Right, it would run it against a test, and once it gets code that passes that test, like a genetic kind of way of coding, if you will. Right. Evolutionary way of coding. That's going to be, those things are going to be where this stuff gets really interesting. So does that round out like your experience with Copilot so far, and where you think it's kind of going to go?
Yeah. The thing is like it's a super early preview. I don't know how many people have access, but it can't be more than the thousands, I would assume. Because they said that before the technical preview was only hundreds that they were using it. I'm really interested in like what does it look like in a year when tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, have used it, and when they when it starts showing up in VS Code as like, hey, you want because like there's tons of people using VS Code, but if it starts promoting itself in VS Code, because there's an incentive here, right? This is all Microsoft. They're using their editor. It's their company. And then on their README, I just actually didn't realize this till today. It says, will there be a paid version? If the technical preview is successful, our plan is to build a commercial version of GitHub Copilot for the future. We want to use this preview to learn how people will use GitHub Copilot and what it takes to operate it at scale. So I can imagine that maybe the paid version is what analyzes your own code. Like maybe the version we're seeing now is maybe the free version for everyone that feeds their machine to, it feeds the data set. That will be the paid version that then will also analyze your personal code or your organizational code. I'm totally speculating here, but I could see how that would be an incentive for you to pay for GitHub Enterprise or GitHub orgs or whatever. So sorry, you talk for a second. I'm looking up the video. Someone in chat's asking for this video on a day as a developer.
I agree. By the way, I do want to see that video too. And I think, I also think that a path toward more like combination with the IntelliSense and documentation to make it more of a training and an actual pair programming user or developer experience versus like maybe having a little bit more explanation of why it chose that code snippet, or if you do accept that code snippet, what it is, or link to like the documentation for that thing so that it would already anticipate your next step, right? So if you do a code complete, like you were saying, like it's deprecated Terraform, maybe it gives you a link to the Terraform documentation so that you can validate what it just provided you, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the next thing you would probably want to do, right?
Yeah, and
if you were being good about it.
And the reality is, like, I think that, in my job, as a DevOps person, I write a lot of the same stuff over and over, right? Like infrastructure is infrastructure. I'm creating EC2s. I'm creating all the scaling groups. I'm creating, Google Kubernetes clusters. And so that stuff is all in a repo that I have access to somewhere. And then, so a lot of times what I'm end up doing is I'm not going to Stack Overflow. I'm going to my own old code and then copying and pasting it into my new stuff. And this seems like a lot more efficient way than some sort of advanced snippets add-on. Because I don't know if you've been into your own like personal snippets, but I've never, I so rarely do that stuff because whenever I try to implement it myself, it's changed 6 months later. Like I'm not doing that way anymore. Now I have to maintain, like the maintenance of my snippets is more than the advantage of my snippets. And so
I didn't think about the snippets angle is like, that could be pretty powerful.
Yeah. So if you're intelligently scanning all my stuff,
Yeah, so if Copilot could like auto-generate a point-in-time snippets library for you, that'd be
or if it's just simply suggesting based on what I've already written. So if it knows my way, or like this example with the Terraform of using the modern Terraform 1.0 way, if it was looking at my other code, it would I would assume it would highlight or prefer those suggestions over its own. And then, I mean, that's the thing. It's like there's endless. Like there's endless possibility here.
Yes.
I hope it does all the things. Though. Yeah.
It's very cool though. Like cool that they're trying it, right? Like this is like really pushing the developer experience into new areas for sure.
Yeah. Especially when GitHub tries something, it's kind of like, when Google tries something in Gmail and they experiment. Like, you and I were talking last week about how the Gmail autocomplete. This feels a lot like that, where I start typing, I forget that it's there. I start typing, and then it autofills, and I go, oh, that's right. I have this thing in the background, and then I read their statement, and then I think about it. Is that what I want to say? And then I tab or I don't tab, right? And that's very much the workflow of this.
And the difference there, though, is that the Gmail one for sure is it's based off that person's writing style.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Because the suggestions I've seen, I say y'all a lot, and my suggestions will have y'all in it, and it'll be the way I phrase things typically, right?
Right.
Whereas I don't think that's turned on for Copilot yet. And like to your point, where I think eventually once it's released, likely you'll opt into a thing where it will scan your repos, and then it will weigh, it'll show a preference toward what you have written in the past, and then fill it in with whatever is in the global model.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly early days compared to, I think, to the Gmail one.
Yeah.
So real quick, to the previous conversation on watching someone go throughout their day as a high-paid senior engineer. This is over on Colt Steele's YouTube channel. I'll put the link in chat. Colt Steele has got like 1 million Udemy students, and I got to hang out with him at Udemy's conference a couple of times. Walk around San Francisco. Really cool guy, and makes great courses. I own at least 1 or 2 of them, and he did this thing where he paid, or he had a friend and got permission from their client and them and everything. And he has great intro graphics and sort of argues against the idea that somehow a senior engineer knows everything that they're writing. And so he goes through this, he basically breaks down some stats of what happened in this person's day and puts it into a nice visualization for 10 minutes. You're not like literally watching this person, but yeah. And so the person's like logging about what they did all day, and then he looks at the data of what they did, like how many websites did they do, how many Google searches did they do, how much code did they write, what were they writing. Yeah, so it's a really cool little breakdown of even a senior engineer, how much time they spend on the internet looking up answers. So anyway, I put that in chat. Cold Steel.
So they got the Google search history from that developer.
Yeah, I think he just recorded his screen too. But yeah, he also did some analytics on the history. And I think if I remember correctly, one of the days it was like a rabbit hole kind of day where you just, I've had several of those recently where you thought you were going to spend an hour on something, and then 8 hours or 7 hours, a whole day later, you're still banging your head against the wall trying to get a thing to do the thing. And anyway, it's a really good video.
Let's both ask each other this as Docker captains: how many times do you pull up the Docker file documentation?
Well, because
is it permanently tattooed on your arm?
A crazy lot. Yeah, I think for up until at least 2019 or 2020, it was permanent tab in my browser. That and Compose, right?
Yes.
I'd say today, just because the change rate has really gone to almost zero over the last 2 or 3 years. And because I'm probably editing files every week, that I've gotten super comfortable. But then there are going to be those times where, like, there's things I don't know everything about a Docker file. Like, I forgot about the maintainer line. I saw someone using it the other day. I was like, oh yeah, there's that maintainer line. I'd never use that. So it's not like I know it all. It's just I don't have to refer to it. What about you?
Right. Same. I mean, I get the source and destination port flipped all the time.
Yeah. Especially due to Kubernetes, right? Like,
yes,
Dockers makes sense. Kubernetes doesn't.
I have to look it up every freaking time. But I'm also not in it as much as you're in it for your job. So
it helps.
But I mean, you go on a 2-week vacation, you're going to have that tab back up, right?
Oh, sure. But like with Terraform, which I've used for years, but I will absolutely have to have every page of every provider up every time I'm using them.
Yes.
Because I don't do it every week. So,
and it also like changes. I mean, that stuff just, it'd be interesting to watch the velocity of changes over time for like the interfaces and the APIs that we typically use. Cause that's very high, I think.
Yeah, a separate conversation or a separate episode, we could talk about Kubernetes 1.22, which is due out next month and is going to have a lot of APIs go away. And one of the ways I know about how much Docker changes their spec and how much Kubernetes changes their spec, or any of these tools, is if I put it in a course. Because the minute that it doesn't work anymore, I have a student that, I mean, rightfully so they say, this doesn't work anymore. And that's kind of how I end up learning about deprecations and deletions firsthand is I write something about it and then people use it.
So is there some kind of like Murphy's Law of course creators and trainers like yourself? Like Like there's some kind of like rule of the universe that the minute you put that into a course, like that's the minute some engineer goes, I think I need to deprecate this API today.
It only gets deprecated based on the number of people that put it in a course. Yeah. Well, I would say that definitely the number of versions in the software in its entirety are directly correlated to how much their API changes, right? Because it always slows down over time. And Kubernetes was one of the reasons I delayed so much of my Kubernetes courses, like putting them out, was because I knew that if I wrote a course, it would have to be completely rewritten in those early days. And it wasn't until like 1.15, 1.14 that I started to consider it, because it started to slow down a little bit.
So if I was a consultant, I would use Copilot to find out what the majority versions of things are and create content to like, help migrate that to like better versions of that.
Yeah.
Maybe. That's interesting.
And getting back to Copilot, like the versions of things and all that, it makes me wonder. I'm now realizing we just did that Docker example, and and the Docker plugin, which I have enabled, it suggests in a different way. It suggests public repos and versions of things by querying the API in the background. And I haven't been seeing that lately. So now I'm wondering if they're somehow stepping on each other's toes, because I actually use that. If I type in from Ubuntu : because like one of the things I like about Ubuntu is they will date-based version their releases, which I love, and especially for production stuff, because I can rely on them not accidentally updating some 2004 version, and it will provide it queries the API and then provides the options. But I haven't been seeing that, and now I'm wondering if Copilot broke it. Maybe there's something in there I got to look at.
That would be an interesting thing to turn that off and see what the differences are.
Yeah. All right. What else? Anything else? Anyone else got questions about Copilot? Mike's calling it
Bret's Law.
Bret's Law.
I like it. I'm going to start using it.
The number of courses I put something, which is like my biggest one, is Kubernetes 1.18 when they completely changed the run command. Yeah, it broke every course I had Kubernetes in. Yeah, so get on the beta if you want to try it out.
Yeah,
it's free.
So I haven't gotten into the beta yet, but now if I do get into the beta, I'll know what to do. Oh, sorry, not the beta, the technical preview.
Technical preview. So yeah, over at copilot.github.com, that's how you get started. David's asking did you try with Python? It's like the best way to use it. I have actually not done any programming since I got access to it about a week and a half ago. I have been entirely in configuration files. So Docker files, Kubernetes files, Terraform files, READMEs, make files. Yeah, I've been in that land, like DevOps land, not in developer land. So I would say it's probably going to be the best inside of programming languages like Node.js and Python and Ruby and Go, because they specifically list those on their site. And if you go looking around YouTube, you will see all sorts of other great developer channels demoing those, but nobody was demoing DevOps stuff. So that's where I wanted to focus today's on is the non-programming languages, more of the, you can argue what YAML really is, the data languages. I don't know. Supposedly it's really good at SQL syntax.
I can imagine that. Yeah. So David, what's your experience with Python? Put it in the chat.
Yeah. How does it work
in
with
terms
Pascal?
of?
Yeah.
Oh, Spectre just redacted their message. In terms of like creating attacks or being malicious, I mean, it depends on if it's actually learning from the user base. But at the same time, like what Bret was showing with respect to like API keys, I have a feeling like if there's some like common way or not so common ways, but just enough content around configuration files with secrets in them, that at some point it'll probably leak that data when it's not like the top 50 like typical ways of storing a configuration file, but it's still enough content in that way. So maybe like an esoteric library or a language that's not as popular or a framework that's not as popular, it's probably going to start leaking those secrets, I would imagine. But the thing is, that means that those secrets are somewhere in the public open source GitHub repo world, right? So
yeah. Well, and because it's not providing snippets, it actually, like it's Peloton asked, one major advantage over Stack Overflow is that the suggestions are almost always from working code. But it's not. It's not a suggestion. It seems like it would be better, but the reality is the code it's generating has never been tested. Unlike a Stack Overflow answer, which presumably the person would have run it or there wouldn't be so many thumbs up, right? So it's weird that I actually started this conversation with like arguing for this and against Stack Overflow, but I could probably argue with myself back and forward and on this topic and say that it's not as good as Stack Overflow. It's more convenient. It's way easier than having to go through 20 different Stack Overflows and realizing that 19 of them have nothing to do with your thing. But like we proved several times today, like in the Markdown and the fact that I got that example that had a GitHub value that doesn't even exist, that it's clearly not producing workable code. Like there's nothing that's testing this code. It's up to you to determine, is that even real code that would work?
Yeah.
So then you can't be a noob in your language and use it. You just can't. You would only be correct 50% of the time.
Yeah. So now I can write my bugs even faster.
That's right. That's right. But as long as you're testing, so here would be the fun thing, is if it creates a test that's broken and fails true to a broken function that it wrote that doesn't work at all. So the test passed on broken code because it wrote both. Is it possible? How easy it is to do that, right?
Yeah,
I suppose it's possible.
That would be an interesting test to try out.
Yeah, I think there's tons of fun to be had with this. I encourage you all. We don't do a lot in the DevOps fan right up here. DevOps fan. This is our DevOps Discord server now. With I think we've got 5,000 or so. Let me look at the latest stats. How many people we got in here? 5,700 members. So it's free. You can come and hang out with us. We've got channels on most DevOps topics, and we don't specifically talk too much about code languages because there's a couple of other really big and really great Discord servers, including one called the Coding Den. And then, of course, if you're language specific, like if your language is with Google or Microsoft languages, they have their own Discord servers. But if I just go to DevOps.fan, I can get in there. Bring it up in the browser. So I encourage you all. We actually have in here. Oh, it's wanting me to sign up, and I haven't logged in, so I'm not going to do that here. But we have channels in there where if people are more interested in this topic, we can actually create a whole channel on Copilot and talk about it. Maybe just an AI channel, but then again, I could see how Copilot could be the entire topic of AI because AI in general is a little too general for this.
Yeah.
But as more of you get into the beta, I'm sorry, technical preview, I would love to see feedback and examples, people jumping into one of the audio channels and sharing their screen and showing off what they're doing with it. Because I'm sure there are more useful ways to use this for DevOps workflows, and I haven't quite figured them all out yet because I've only had it for a week. So, yeah.
Well, I can't wait to be accepted for the tech preview and try it out for myself. But I feel like I'm kind of neutral on it. Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of too early to tell whether it's like actually useful or not.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
I would say in the week of me using it for primarily Terraform, Markdown, Kubernetes, and Docker, and maybe some shell scripting, so some bash stuff and some GitHub Actions, YAML, Markdown. So a lot of YAML and a lot of HCL. I would say that it definitely saved me keystrokes. I don't know if it saved me time.
There we go. Yeah. That's a tweet.
It definitely saves me keystrokes. Writing descriptions, it's great at, you know, in YAML and HTML, writing descriptions, providing me default value things, it's great at. But when it provides me the entire YAML of Markdown YAML of a manifest for Kubernetes, I still have to look at that thing, understand the entire thing it gave me, make sure that I think it's right, and still have to like kind of validate it myself. And that takes just almost as much time as writing it sometimes. So
yeah.
That's a tweet. I'll send that tweet out later.
There we go.
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, let me check real quick.
I think we've gone through this topic.
Yep. Now just everybody needs to get access so we can have another conversation about it where I'm not the only one showing it off.
Yeah, for sure. And next time we can try the live. I don't know if that's going to work.
Yeah. The live share.
Yeah. I think is that part of Workspaces? Or Workspace?
You mean Codespaces?
That's not. Oh yeah, so that's not part of Codespaces.
Two separate features. Yeah, live share and remoting is a different feature which allows you to work on other things that aren't on your machine. So one of the things that what I'm interested in is when you get access, if we're both sharing a live share of the same repo, are we both seeing the same suggestions?
Okay. We'll definitely test that out.
I think that's a way more interesting. Yeah. And like maybe you're sharing your screen and I'm sharing my screen and are we seeing the same thing at the same time? I would presume that it does because it's not user specific, but.
So who's going to be the first person to submit Copilot to use Copilot in a hackathon?
Oh, you mean to like make something new that didn't exist in the world from code?
Just like, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, because it's pretty good on comments, and it's directly, as we've seen today, it's directly related to how good your comment is. So if you're writing great comments, how far could you get to a functioning app that's not just a hello world app, but a functioning app? How far could you get there by never writing code, not writing a single function yourself? Like you only are describing the functions and then tabbing through the options and then accepting it. Can you create a Twitter clone by just using AI generated stuff, synthetic?
I like it. Yeah. I like it.
That's a good challenge. That
is a good challenge. We'll put that out in the world.
If one of you all want to try that challenge once you get access, let us know, and we may highlight your video in this live show. All right. Well, thank you, Nirmal. I'm not trying to kick you out, but I'm definitely gonna have you on again. What are you doing next week?
I mean, I could be here again. No problem.
All right. Let's see if we can make it happen. We'll talk about something else. And it's always great to chat with you. And I can't wait to see you in the real world, and real world hug, high five, and all those things. And for all of those you hanging around for this full hour and a half show about Copilot, I really appreciate you for hanging out. And thumbs up, do the likes, follow, thumbs up, do all that stuff to help us with the algorithm so other people can check out DevOps. I think this is the first time that we've had, I haven't seen any other YouTube videos on DevOps and Copilot. So hopefully we're breaking new ground here. And we will be back here live next week, maybe with Nirmal if we're lucky. And we will see you live.
Thank you, Bret. And I hope you never replace me with Copilot when I'm co-piloting with you on your YouTube live show.
Wait, hold on. Can I do this? Can I do this?
There we go. Oh, no.
So thank you,
the
everyone.
Robots have taken over.
And Normal False is the name of this this robot that I'm spending time with today.
Am I real?
Good jokes. All right. Thanks, man. I'll see you soon. Bye, Internet.
See you later.
See you next week.
Bye.
Same time.
Don't forget.